The marital home is typically the largest asset in your high conflict divorce and the biggest emotional tie to the old life that you are removing yourself from. Today, we're going to talk about the legal facts about your marital home and the emotional situation that you need to overcome in order to navigate your high conflict divorce. Welcome back to Uncontested. So, Stacey, the question of the day is, what is the typical scenario when it comes to the marital home? Like, what's the biggest hang up that we typically see with your clients?
Everyone wants it. Everyone wants the equity. Everyone wants to live in it. Everyone wants to use it as a fighting device. Everyone wants to make that the mountain they're not stepping down off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because like you just said, it's the largest asset, most likely. Usually, let's say. So, what happens with it outside of agreeing, which is the lovely way to deal with it. As a general rule, the courts should award exclusive use and possession of the marital home to the primary residential parent if there are minor children involved. And that's if you're exercising more time sharing, and that's absent compelling financial reasons. So there's a number of ways to get the house. There's a number of ways that you should not be awarded the house.
Mm-hmm.
The first is you need to be able to afford the home. So you can't step into a courtroom and say, I want this house. I've lived in it for 5 years. I'm entitled to it. Are you going to be able to afford it post dissolution? And we've discussed that before. If you have a $4,000 mortgage and even with alimony and child support and your income, you're maxing out at $5,000 a month, there's no way you can afford that home because you won't be able to provide for yourself or your kids outside of that. So it's a lot of things that you need to consider. But will most parties still stand on that mountain and shout, it's mine all day long?
All day long. And do you typically see that there's one parent who's fighting for it for emotional reasons, for giving the kids a safe landing pad, or and one is trying to get more money out of the situation, or is it a mix of both from both sides, you would say?
Absolutely. There's a reason to argue all day long for, right? So I want my kids to be safe, which should be the primary reason, right? We are in a school district and they know the neighbors and they play with the kids around the corner. And this has been their home. This is the only place they've ever known, and I can afford it. And then the other side is just doing it purely out of hate. And no, I don't want her to have it.
So let's go a couple different avenues here when it comes to the marital home, because I had a lot of assumptions when it came to my own scenario. You said exclusive right and use of the marital home until, isn't it like the youngest is emancipated, or is it the oldest? How does that work?
It would be the youngest until they're either 18 or they graduate from high school or they become emancipated.
Okay. So basically, the primary parent could get exclusive use of the home until the youngest is 18, whatever. My concern, I remember, was like, well, I'm going to be paying all of the mortgage payments. I'm going to be renovating this home, and then we're going to sell it when the kids turned 18. And now all of a sudden it's worth $1 million, and I'm the only one who's been carrying the financial load, and he's going to make a payday off of me. I feel like that was a big assumption that I made, but that's not how that works, is it?
So again, it all depends.
Oh,
That's our typical answer, right?
yes.
So you're not, when we're talking about exclusive use and possession, we're not talking about ownership.
Okay.
We're talking about the ability to use it. You're basically borrowing it for a certain period of time. And a lot of times the courts will award an equal divide afterwards with the idea that if you were somewhere else, you'd be paying rent and there would be no equity in that. So here you're kind of renting out your home until the kids are old enough.
Oof. And for those wanting that emotional, like, cut ties with each other, you're essentially tied to this asset until your kids are 18. Is that really allowing you the peace that you need to start your new life if you're
Right.
having to call your ex every time the dishwasher breaks or something like that. They kind of are your landlord at that point or a partner in your.
Well, so usually it would become you are solely still responsible for or all of the expenses associated with this home, just as you would be had you left it.
Mhm.
You're just saying, I can afford this one. So a lot of people need to consider when they're coming in, what is the mortgage? What am I getting at the end of the day? We also want to play the real estate game. I'm not a fortune teller, right? I mean, no one predicted 2007. So what will happen tomorrow? I don't know. But if you're willing to roll the dice and say, I think that the real estate market's going to continue to increase. And when we live in Florida, um, that tends to be the projectile, right? I
Right.
mean, for the most part. Um, but it's a gamble,
Mhm.
so for example, there are cases right now where 2 years ago right on the edge of COVID, a lot of people were moving to Florida, right? So house prices went through the roof. 2 years later, those same people who bought a house are now divorcing, and they're once again not as bad as 2007, but we're negative equity
Mm.
or we're right on the line. So it is hard to say, you know, do we sell the house and both of us walk away with nothing? Or is it fair? Is it a good idea for me to fight for this house where there might not be any equity, but I can afford it and then keep it and then hopefully it goes up later.
Yeah. And that's kind of I feel like with any financial investment situation is you have to be okay with if you're gonna stick it out for the long term, just understanding that it it may not work out, it might, but in the meantime, I'm able to offer my kids a safe space, something they're familiar with, and I know I can afford it, then yeah, it makes sense to fight for it. Um, Now let's kind of backtrack a little bit because we're talking about like once the divorce is over, right and use, exclusive use, all of that. What about like when you're first splitting up? What do you typically see happens when somebody like packs up and moves out and now all of a sudden they're claiming that they want access to the house or they want to claim the house?
They still own the house.
They
And
still.
that's a tough one because he moved out. Why is he allowed in my space? I'm not allowed in his space. Because he owns it. So that one's a that one's hard to swallow because you don't want another person in your space, especially after you've left and it is contentious.
Mhm.
Um, is it more awkward if you're living in two separate bedrooms with a lock on the door? Maybe a little bit. That happens a lot too.
Oh, wow.
And so while we're discussing it, I think it's interesting to discuss that a court is unlikely to award exclusive use of possession if the two parties can live together and it is not feasible for one party to move out and the other person alone to carry that mortgage or that the payment, whatever it might be.
So what might that look like then? They
That,
force the sale?
well, so they will not force the sale until a final divorce. So you are stuck in this home, usually, with another person with whom you no longer are having a, you know, comfortable, lovely relationship that you might not want to walk around freely in your home with,
Yeah.
and you are stuck because neither party's getting exclusive use. That is really left. The courts will consider exclusive use if there's some sort of domestic violence or there's a danger that that person is posing to himself, herself, the other party, or the children. If that's not present and you don't have the funds to maintain the house on your own because while you're there, you might not be getting alimony, child support. If you're both living there, that those funds don't exist. Well, looks like we're all living together as a happy
Oh
family.
my gosh. That sounds so stressful. And I think back to my own scenario, like he moved out, left 6 hours away. And I recall you telling me like he could move home tomorrow if he felt like it. Is that a thing?
Um, Technically, yes. You had not been divorced. You both own that property. There was nothing stopping him from doing it.
That really would have put a wrench
Just a
in my
knock on the
healing
door and
process.
I'm home.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And
So,
now we both want this house.
yeah. And so I know that I was doing a little bit of research before I came here, but you're totally the expert on this. I was reading something to where whenever you are filing for divorce, you should ask for that whenever you serve them for the first time. Is there like any rules around that as far as?
That comes with everything that we've discussed before, where we say in a petition you ask for everything up front.
Okay.
And then it plays out, where you might piecemeal it down depending on how long the dissolution process is lasting. But if you don't ask for it, then at what point
Yeah,
is it going to be granted? It's not. You have to ask for it.
that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is if you're fighting for it and you're doing it because you know you can afford it, it's safe for your kids, it's going to make sense for you to build a new life with this old home, by all means, fight for it. If it's an emotional pull on trying to hurt the other person or to make a come up off the property or things like that, I mean, at the end of the day, the court is going to award it to whoever it's equitable, right? But
Right.
they're going to
More
move
likely
in
than
favor of
not,
the
they're
kids.
going to sell it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's just not feasible.
Okay.
So I would say the majority of cases, the house gets sold and it gets divided, the proceeds somehow, because that all becomes part of equitable distribution. And it's a lot easier when there is a substantial amount of debt to pull that from the equity in a house so that each party is walking away. If all things being equal and you can resolve all of the outside problems and the only asset is this house, that's also an issue where they say it's not a, a compelling financial reason. You can't leave the other party with nothing either.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that caveat of compelling financial. So
Right.
the other side can say, well, wait a minute. Just because there's minor children and just because she can't afford this mortgage, if I'm left with nothing, I can't move on with my life. So the court will look at that as well. But if both parties can afford, if the party moving out can afford to move on and the party who wants to remain could afford those bills, then it becomes, an issue for the court to say best interest of the children. And, as a general rule, we should lean this way because there is no outside reason why we can't.
I gotcha. What mistakes do you typically see people make when it comes to putting their line in the sand when it comes to fighting
It's
for their house?
purely emotional.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just to hurt the other person.
Ever had anybody like change the locks on someone? How does that affect them?
No, it's real bad. And then we have to tell them to undo them. Like you don't have a right to do that. You have to let the person in. I have absolutely seen locks on bedrooms though.
Okay.
So like this is my personal space. We're stuck here together. And that's just part of I have a lock on, bedroom doors. I think a lot of people and their basic doorknob has a lock.
Yeah.
So, that's fine.
I just think about the resilience that is being built in those scenarios where you have to have
It is.
massive restraint to live in your own home with someone who is in a high conflict divorce under the same roof. Wow.
Yeah, and imagine one part, but both parties are fighting for it, or one party says, "I want to sell it. I don't even want to be here. I don't want to be here. I hate this house. I want to sell it."
Mm-hmm.
And the other person's like, "No, I'm going to live here forever." And now you're not going to get that equity that you want. So, haha,
Goodness gracious.
it's so angry over a house, but like we've discussed the whole time, these are things that you want to think of in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things a lot of people don't consider is how much do I love this house? And do I love the house because I love it for my kids and I love what I can build here and the changes I can make to it to make it my house? Or maybe I don't want to be in this house because it's done and every memory I have with this other person is here. Maybe you're in an emotional place where you need to separate yourself from that. Get
Yeah.
out.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to, like you said, things we've talked about in the past, the list. How's this going to make me happy from an emotional standpoint? How's it going to make me happy from a legal standpoint? I know in my scenario, like my mortgage is $1,200. Like that's a huge reason why I fought so hard
All
for
day
my
long.
house. That's a life changing a monthly payment if I were to go and try to find an apartment for $2,200 a month, and I'm nearly doubling my expenses and shrinking where we're at. So these are things that our viewers need to consider before they go into their first consultation, or, maybe they do file the paperwork and say they'd like exclusive rights, but once they crunch the numbers, they go like, I can't.
This is not feasible.
Yeah, I can't handle this mortgage by myself.
Right. And you need to consider that your location, how's that going to go up or down? If you live in Florida, insurance can go up $1,000 a year
Right.
because of our location. If you're living on the coast, it can shoot up. And now, unlike maybe a rental payment that can go up X amount based on your contract, your house payment can go up exponentially because of that. Or if you're in an ARM, or depending on your mortgage rates or how that's in your contract, that can go up too. It's a lot of things that you need to think about,
Yeah.
instead of just, I want this house. Can you have this house?
Question. So we've got two people that are fighting over this house.
Mhm.
Maybe they financed it together. But wife has been a stay-at-home mom for years and years, so she doesn't really have any income. She's on the mortgage currently, but when she gets exclusive use and rights or whatever, maybe she's awarded the marital home. Um, she has to be able to qualify for that mortgage. Do we know that she qualifies for that before she gets awarded the house, or have
So
you?
again, not necessarily, because we're confusing ownership and exclusive use.
Okay, yeah,
So you were awarded the house, right? You
yeah,
got the house. It is 100% your house. On the monopoly board, you own that home.
I love it. Okay.
Exclusive use is just borrowing the home. You don't necessarily have to change the mortgage. There are divorces where it's in both names, it's in one party's name. But because the other party is in such a different financial position and able to afford that house and another house, it's possible that the version of alimony is the secondary, the spouse not living in the house is paying that mortgage for you. So there is no financial changes that need to be made to the mortgage.
I like that. So another form of alimony, we talked about runway. Like, we're not trying to build a marble house off of this person, but, build a runway for us to start a new life. And if that means part of your alimony is, hey, maybe you pay the 80% of the mortgage for a few years while I get back on my feet. That's something you can mediate for, or that's something that we could ask for, as we're going to try.
Negotiations all day long are a million times better than
Yeah.
rolling the dice in a courtroom if you don't know how it's going to play out or you're not comfortable, right? If you can get there and say, like you were just saying, a stay-at-home mom who maybe hasn't worked a full-time job for 5, 6 years, and then they're like, okay, well, going to divorce, I'm going to have to start working full-time. Maybe my income will be $40,000 a year. Well, if my mortgage is $100,000 remains on the mortgage and I'm going to have to refinance this, how long do I have? And then you build in that time frame for a refinance if you're trying to be awarded the marital.
So basically, what I'm hearing is, for our viewers, number one, we need to decide whether we're fighting for it out of emotion,
Right.
or whether we're building a foundation that makes sense, that's actually going to benefit us, our kids, and the new life that we're building. But then also, there's a multitude of ways that you could go about securing that place for your kids to sleep at night. It's not like they're going to be pushed out of the home tomorrow, like, especially in the state of Florida. Both parties get access and use of the house until the divorce is over, unless otherwise asked for. I'm trying to make sure that we
Hmm.
recap, because we went a couple
Yeah,
different
no,
places.
I genuinely appreciate that you're taking all my words and making them make more sense.
Yeah. Well, my ADHD, you deal with a million things. We'll come back together at some point. But it can be custom built, especially through negotiations, as far as if you can come to an agreement with that other person. But to reassure anyone here who is in one of those situations where it's going to go to trial, it's going to get in front of a judge. At the end of the day, they're going to decide equitable distribution. Emotions are going to be taken out of the situation. So it's not going to be who deserves it more. It's going to be numbers, where's the kids?
Right.
And that could probably help someone sleep better at night, knowing If you're fighting it for your kids, it's the best option for them. You can present factual information on rent is going to triple if we have to move from this home to this home. I can pay for it. I have the credit score. I have the income. You know, fight for your house by all means. But if it's an emotional, I'm just trying to hurt the other person type of
It's not worth
situation,
it.
yeah, it's not going to pay off for you in the long run.
Right. And that comes back to the whole time we've discussed before you make that leap at all points, make sure that you understand or even have a basic knowledge of what your financial situation is going to look like. Not alimony, not child support. You're not trying to forecast the future. What is your personal half going to look like? Am I able to work? Am I going to work? What type of job could I get? What is my source of income? Can I afford these things, and these things? How much are they? I mean, how many people don't know how much their mortgage is?
We've talked about that allowance word.
Mhm.
So if you've been living on an allowance for a while, now you're stepping into a role where you're going to be 100% responsible for all of the expenses in your home, and you don't know what that looks like. It's a little bit more
Right.
preparation involved.
But that fear of I'm going to be kicked out of my home is not necessarily true. The court's not is highly unlikely at any point to sell it out. Will never sell it out from under you, or it's very rare that absent agreement the house gets sold during the dissolution. It
Unless you
is
both agree.
right.
Okay.
Right. So you will be in your home pending this dissolution and trying to figure out where you're going to be, where you need to be. And that all comes back to if you can mediate this and say, I could be in this house for 24 months successfully and refinance it. And if equity is the issue, because it always comes down to money, what is that number that I need to give the other person to be able to stay in this house? The default is to know that if you have more time sharing than the other person and you are the primary custodial parent, the court will lean towards giving you exclusive use and possession, not 100% ownership, but exclusive use. You're borrowing your home kind of until your kid's youngest graduates from high school or turns 18, becomes emancipated,
Yeah.
gets married.
And I tell you, like, it sounds it sounds so good, exclusive use and all of that good stuff. But for me, I am such an independent person. Like, I would feel
It's still not yours.
it's still not mine. So I'm not free. And that's something that I would have to come to terms with. And maybe, maybe that's something else we can go into. Let's just say right now my kids are 5, right?
Hmm.
We're divorcing, our kids are 5, and I get exclusive use of the house. And 5 years from now, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm good. We can sell it now. That's an option still as well. We're not locked into this by any means.
It all depends on what
Okay.
your contract says, or your agreement or the final order, and most likely no. I think at any point the other party always does want to sell it, get their equity, and move on, depending on obviously their motivation for it to
That's
be
why I said
sold.
it doesn't feel like it's free yet.
It's not, right?
And,
Because even though when you are granted exclusive use and possession, that means the other person can no longer come in the home and they're not making decisions really as to, if you need a new air conditioner, you're buying that new air conditioner. But when it comes to the sale, they still have to sign off on it and agree to it. And it depends on what the terms of that order say.
So this is where I'm going to go again. I think it's just going to come down to what does happiness look like for you 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years from now? Are you still going to be so hell bent on having your kids in this school zone
Hmm.
from the age of 5 until they're 18? Or is it better to let's just press the reset button right now? I mean, for me, that wasn't the case. I fought for my house. I was not going to give that up. But, I just wonder how many people are still holding on to relationships because their dictator is telling them that they won't have anywhere to live.
Hmm.
Dictator. That was our, was our
Right.
last week's
Yep.
episode. How
And
many
can't afford it.
and can't afford it.
Hmm.
And also, you just don't realize what other resources are out there for those. Like, there's so many women and children that are still in relationships, staying in the same home with people who don't want to see them succeed and flourish and grow. And they just, you'll never get it. You'll never be able to stand on that. There's resources, there's benefits programs, there's assistance programs, you can go find your new community, build a life you love. But is fighting for this house the best thing for your kids? Is what you'd have to come to your own conclusion on.
You just have to look at everything in advance.
There's so
Mhm.
many facets.
Is this something I really want? It's like every other part of it, but when this is usually the biggest piece of the puzzle, you wanna have a pretty good feeling of how you feel about that piece.
It came down to the wire for me on this house. That was the only thing, that was the biggest thing for me. So I think it's important to note, if fighting for your marital home is in the best interest of your kids, if it creates some sort of normalcy for them, keeps them in a school district that they love, with a support system around you that will be able to support you through this single parent transition that you're going to go through, you can afford it, fight for it. Especially if you're going to be the primary parent, because I think that's another term that we've thrown around a couple times today, but we've talked before. Florida is primarily 50-50, but when we say primary parent, that means they lean a little bit more
Right,
than 50.
right. We have a default assumption
Mhm.
that both parents can exercise equal time sharing, but if one parent is not, and it's unquestionable, then there's going to be a primary custodial parent who's
Yeah,
exercising more time sharing. But it also, this is different if there's an out-of-state parent, and if, that other parent has really, even if they're not out of state or they're local, they've not spent a majority of time with the kids, and it certainly doesn't it's a non-issue for people whose children are grown.
that's true, because we kind of really hung up on the under 18 thing today.
But there's also the issue, and this does not come up at all very often, but, if one house is retrofitted to somebody who has a disability, that's something you wanna
Mm.
consider too. You don't It doesn't come up often, but enough to just put it in the back of your head, you know, that I might need this, or if you have a disability that is progressive, something like MS, and say, we've already retrofitted our home
Mhm.
for wheelchair access or a motor scooter or things like that. I'm not going to be able to afford this later. That's when you want to negotiate for your home, because that's
Yeah.
extremely expensive to redo.
And I think that's, somebody needed to hear that, right? It's,
Mm-hmm.
you needed to say that. Somebody needed to hear that. And just to kind of circle back, I think we touched on a lot today. Somebody needed to hear the answers that we had, or the topics that we had, but it all goes back to that, first and foremost, understanding what you want out of this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because remember, this divorce is a it's a very painful experience, but you're gonna get through it, and 10 years from now, you'll look back and be like, "Yeah, it wasn't that bad," because 'cause you'll have gone through 14 more challenges in life. But you
Thought you were
gotta
going to say
know.
divorces. But
No, not divorces, challenges, challenges. But you gotta know, emotionally, legally, what's my responsibility, what's Stacy's responsibility. You gotta know that. You also have to prepare. We've talked about documenting time sharing, because
hmm
primary parent, time sharing, if they're not exercising, that's gonna help you fight for your home. You need to start preparing that documentation now. The retrofitting of any sort of disabilities, things like that, documenting that, pictures of your home, work that's been done that differentiates your home from what's on the market today, especially
try,
if it's for your child.
sure. Try to figure out your finances.
Yeah.
Can you afford this? What is your mortgage? If you're on the mortgage, even if he's hiding this information from you, and you think that you have no access, you go to the bank, call the bank. If you are on a loan, then you have as much access to it as the other person. Say, can you just tell me what the mortgage payment is?
And then, of course, if you can't, if maybe he financed it in his own name, financial mandatory disclosures,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to figure it out anyways,
Right.
whenever the paperwork comes through. So I think for anybody out there who's considering, separating themselves from a relationship that they're no longer aligned with, and that house is a big hang up for you, I'm glad you were able to tune into this episode to really understand there's a lot of options for you in the state of Florida when it comes to fighting for your home if you're doing it for the right reasons. And you actually make it a trial and you have the documentation that you need to prove your side of things, it'll definitely help you more than hurt you. But if you're fighting for it from an emotional standpoint, for a payout to hurt the other person, whatever it is, at the end of the day, it sounds like the courts are just going to go, it's done. It's done. um, and if you get the exclusive owner use of the property, then that will help you as you transition through your kids getting out of school. So there's a lot I think that we covered today.
There is.
Anything
I think our big thing is stop resting on your emotions. As easy as it is to say, and I know I say it all the time, but
mhm.
I'm not on the other side of the coin, so I understand that it is highly emotional. But if you can step out of that and say, just for 1 minute, what does it look like if I'm not tied to this with my heart and my mind? What does this look like?
And
I
also
think it changes.
take into account that like a home is not the physical residence. A home is what you make with the time that you have and the connections that you make and the safety that you create for your kids. You can create that anywhere. You can create that in a one bedroom apartment. If you have bunk beds, you can create that in a camper. You can create that when you move in with your girlfriend into her duplex for 6 months while you figure it out. But as long as you're the safe place for your kids, then you're always putting them at the forefront and creating a home that they will never forget. Because those memories come from where they felt safest, not what colors the wall were. Right?
You can paint them anything you want.
Anything you want.
Post divorce, they're yours.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Uncontested. We will catch you next time.